Welcome back to the Leadership Growth Blueprint podcast. Today's guest is Stephanie Davis, CEO of Laughology and one of UK's leading voices on happiness and engagement at work. As ITV's This Morning happiness expert and an award-winning comedian turned positive psychology expert, Stephanie has spent over 2 decades helping organizations like Virgin, NatWest, and Vodafone build stronger cultures, better leaders, and happier teams. She blends science, strategy, and humor to drive real performance. And today we're diving into how laughter can become a serious leadership advantage. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
I love that introduction. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you've definitely done some pretty awesome things. So in broad terms, how would you describe the work you do in leadership and executive development for someone hearing about you and the company for the first time?
What we do, I always think about if I'm explaining this to my mum, because my mum always asks me, what is it that you actually do? And it's still now, she doesn't know. So the way I explain it to my mum is, look, I help leaders, managers, teams to get on better. And at the heart of that is how we do that, how we help people to be happy at their work. And we sprinkle that with a little bit of magic dust, which is in my sessions that I run. We use humor and laughter and playfulness because it helps the brain connect better with learning. And laughter is the glue that holds social relationships together. And actually, if we get that stuff right, if we can have fun, not laugh at, not be silly, but if we get the social aspect right, as human beings, that's what matters. And that's what helps us be productive and fly.
100%. And on a personal note, I try to convince myself that I'm antisocial and that I'm introverted. That is such a lie. I thrive in social environments. I thrive when I laugh, especially at work. So thank you for that intro. But take us kind of back. So you were an award-winning comedian, and then all of a sudden you're like, hold on, I actually want to help companies grow and create a happier work environment. How did that transpire?
I'll take you back a little bit further
Okay,
to give you the foundation. So I didn't
please.
do very well at school, and I don't know how this translates, but I was suspended and expelled. So I don't know if that makes sense in America, but basically I was kicked out of school for
No,
being a little bit naughty.
it
Yeah. And the reason for that is I'm dyslexic and ADHD. So when I was at school, that wasn't a thing. So I was lazy and naughty. And I knew something wasn't right in terms of I wasn't getting it as fast as my school peers, as my schoolmates, but I didn't really know what it was because I wasn't diagnosed. And so I realized quite early on, rather than being laughed at when I was asked to read something out or do something that I couldn't do, if I got in there first and made people laugh and deliberately did it wrong and was deliberately the class clown, I had control rather than feeling like I was out of control. So I upped that. That's great for me and my school friends, not so great for my teachers. And that kind of snowballed. So I'd get kicked out and then I'd be out the classroom messing about, be bored. It eventually got expelled. And I had one teacher actually who was curious to lean in and see what motivated me. And I loved performing arts. So she got me into performing arts, ended up going to performing arts school and found who I was, that I could express myself. I had a teacher there who got me into stand up and that changed my world. So I found something I was good at and I wanted to learn to read and write because it was exciting to go to these new venues and to be able to read about where I was going to and also to write material. And when I was doing that, I realized that stand up was helping me to feel confident, to help me to learn to read and write. And I knew that there was something in that. And when you very first start stand up, you don't get paid because you're a bit rubbish. You have to die a lot, to get good. And my goodness, I died. And so I thought at that time, well, maybe I could help young people like me. So I took stand up into schools to help young people like me with their reading and writing skills. And I just realized there's something going on here. It's not just they enjoy the learning's sticking better because of the way we're doing it, because of the humor. Is there something in this? So I started doing research and I was really lucky. I went back to university and the university diagnosed me with dyslexia. They also allowed me to do a master's in the psychology of humor and laughter. and how it helps with learning and productivity and the power of happiness for learning. I started taking that into talks in the corporate world and started getting noticed because it was something really different. And I'm still here today, Jordan. No one's found me out yet. That's the truth.
So that is amazing. Thank you for the insights. I also struggle with dyslexia and ADHD. I feel like I was in the principal's office at least once a week, and he's always having to sit down with me. Jordan, you got to stop, being bad in class, et cetera, et cetera. And I also love stand-up comedy. And it's interesting how you actually pursued that. So congratulations for you. And now you're out here really helping organizations become happier and increase their learning ability. I think that's super cool. When you are working with organizations, what is like a belief system or a philosophy you like to instill into the organization that you're working with?
One of our really um, workshops that people really love is a workshop called Flip It Thinking, and it's one of our most popular. And it's based on my research that I did when I was doing a master's, and I call Flip It your humor toolkit. It's about how we look at situations differently. Look, the world is busier than ever. There's so much change going on in organizations, more change than there ever was. And AI is a big thing, but it's about people. How do we get people to think differently, to look at the world differently, and be able to be resilient? And Flip is a toolkit that we can use ourselves, but also as leaders and share when change is going on. And it's really similar to CBT, but it's a little bit funnier, is what I say. And what FLIP stands for is the F for FLIP is for focus, the L is for language, the I is for imagination, and the P is for pattern breaking. And it can be used as a phrase to say, how do we flip this? Also broken down, we give people little tools and techniques. Because when we have a situation in front of us as human beings, our first auto response is to react to it, react over respond. So it's asking people to think about, where is your focus? Is it on your emotions, which is what drives us as human beings? Or is it on the situation and curiosity and playfulness, and how do I explore this in a different way? And if it's on emotions, do we need to switch that emotion before we can move forward? And I'm not saying that that's dead easy, but sometimes we need to feel better to think better. And
Oof.
that, and we can absolutely do that. We can change the way we feel by movement, or by changing the environment, or by listening to music. So do we need to shift that a little bit before we move forward? So that F for focus is knowing on what am I focusing on? Is it helpful or unhelpful? And how can we use humor and playfulness within that? L for language is quite often we are our own worst enemies. We use our own internal dialogue to say, this isn't working, it's the worst thing in the world, or we catastrophize. Now, that's really normal human behavior. In psychology, they call this common cognitive errors, but I don't like big words. So I just like to say it's a little bit wonky. We just need to correct it a little bit. And even that word wonky, it's a nice word. I have to be very careful as dyslexic because it could mean something else.
What else could it mean? All right,
I
never
can't
mind, never
say.
mind. Okay, no worries.
So is your language a little bit wonky? And then are we also going to other people to back up our language and create a little echo chamber? So where can we shift that language? And comedians are brilliant linguists, and they'll change one word to change the context of a situation. So would you rather do a test or a quiz? You'd rather do a quiz. So it's not about lying. It's changing that language. I for imagination. How can we be creative? How can we be playful? Often we go back to what we've always done. And actually, humour and playfulness opens up the art of possibility. It's not that we can always do it that way, but what's the biggest idea? What boundaries are we putting over it? And how can we be really playful and curious and go, what if? How could? And then P is for pattern breaking. Look, if we change the way we look at something in terms of our focus, if we change the way that we talk about it in our language, if we change the way we think about it in our imagination, we flip a situation on its head. That's all humor is. So it's your humor toolkit to see the world differently.
I absolutely love that framework. And the way you broke it down makes so much more sense. Um, I'm dying to see what a live workshop would look like because well, for one, you're really funny, so thank you for being enjoyable on the podcast, and two, I definitely see the advantage of organizations, implementing this 100%. Do kind of want to backtrack, and forgive me for doing this, but there's a lot of people out there that suffer, not, I don't want to say suffer, it is our superpower, that have ADHD and sometimes dyslexia. What were some tips and tricks you were able to, I guess, do when you were in college getting your master's with those two diagnoses?
So I think I was really lucky in that I do have a milder form of dyslexia, and I do know some people who it's more severe and it's been really life impacting. But I was very lucky in that I had a great tutor, and also reading for me, what really changed, and it sounds a really small thing, was reading out loud. So it was not something that was never told to me, but actually reading out loud and finding the rhythm in the reading was an important part for not just reading stuff, but also for writing stuff down on the computer. So rather than it coming out as a big blur of words, read it afterwards. And I remember my tutor saying to me, just write it. Don't even worry about spelling. And this, the real interesting thing about learning is we are told a lot about there's a right and a wrong way. And so the brain self edits. And when you're dyslexic, because the right way is difficult for us and those connections are difficult, then it stops us from doing anything. And so my tutor said to me, just get it all out. Just get it all out. And so just writing it as I spoke it, because I'm good at bringing stuff to life as I speak. And he said, just do that and then go back and edit it. And it was like the most simplest thing, but the biggest change ever. And I was also allowed to present some of my findings and
Mm.
data, which made a big difference. And with the ADHD part, for me, it's very much about breaking stuff down and chunking it down because I get overwhelmed and I go off in different directions. And then something that's this big becomes huge. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've created a monster. So actually writing stuff down and having a structure and keep going back. This is what I'm focusing on. This and making those focus points shorter. 45 minutes, allow myself, I'm going to deeply focus 45 minutes and go out, get some fresh air, move about. And I need that. So just training my brain to be able to work differently. And what I'd always say, the more I found out about dyslexia and ADHD, it's not about boxing people that dyslexic means this or ADHD. Everyone's different because their upbringing. So finding what works for you is important.
100%. Yes. Reading out loud for me has done wonders in my life. I feel like I can retain it more. It, like you said, it just helps me overall with reading and writing. With ADHD, I was never on medication until recently. And oh my gosh, literally life changing. Like I can do a repetitive task for hours on end and not have the worst internal dialogue ever. Like I can actually do things and I'm way more productive. So it's fantastic. Thanks, medication. I am a bit curious though. When you are on TV with the ITV morning show Happiness Expert, are you referring to like when you do give advice and tips, are you speaking about individual happiness or organizational happiness?
Individual is what I talk about mainly there because it's relevant more for the person. Even in organizations, I'm talking about individuals, but also how we create these cultures where people can really thrive. But for TV, it's normally the individual.
Gotcha. I bring that up because if you as an individual, of course, if you were able to, I guess, create more happiness within your life and you can show up like that in your workplace, then by you creating that internal change, maybe, just maybe, you can create that smaller change within the organization without the leader adopting that change. This is a leadership show, so we can definitely talk about the leadership as a whole or the organization as a whole. But I was just a bit curious on that. When you are working with organizations, how long would you say the process is from unhappy work environment to, we work with Stephanie for XYZ time and this is the happiest we've ever been. We're thriving, production is through the roof, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, I mean, how long's a piece of string? It depends what else is going on in that organization. Quite often we do a lot of research, it's like, do we need to get rid of people? No, there's always lots going on. And so we always start with values. What are the values that the organization holds? And what are what I call the lived values? 'Cause sometimes there's a difference between those things. Because the values can just be written on a wall and they can just be words, but the behaviors are what I'm interested in. The stuff that people are doing and seeing that's not corrected or corrected, the stories, the way people treat each other, the unwritten rules. That's the stuff I'm really interested in. And that's the stuff that we need to unpick a little bit. So if we've got engagement scores and we've got some data and we can do some interviews around what's really happening, that's a really good starting point. If we've already got that stuff and we've got, you know, a nice baseline and it's just because the organization's gone through change and people are feeling a little bit unhappy, then there's a different process. I'm trying to get out of this here, but it's a really difficult question to answer
Sure.
depending on what's going on in that organization, really. You know, is it a manager thing? Is it a leader thing? Is it top down? Is it culture change? What's actually going on underneath it? And I always talk about happiness it's a moment in time. Even though I talk about happy cultures, what I actually mean by that is a place where people can have really tough conversations. And that's okay because they know they feel safe. It doesn't mean that we are happy all the time and nothing ever happens where people go, I've had a tough day today. Because actually, happy cultures means the opposite. We've got resilient people that we can have those tough conversations. There's not toxic positivity. And what I mean by that is real conversations and real challenges aren't highlighted. They absolutely are when we've got cultures where people thrive because we've got peak performance and we've got clarity and we've got a really good understanding. And also, we've got humour. You know, you can hear laughter and just people talking normally. So all that stuff is really important.
I'm dying to know though, like how can one cultivate happiness at an individual level? Like I would love your take on that as the happiness expert.
There's things that we absolutely can do. And what's important is that we recognize all emotions. Now, the biggest things that are really important for human happiness are a good support network. So who's around you? We know what we call warm connections are one of the most important parts of feeling like we are connected and we belong, which is a big part of happiness. So it's not about lots of connections. It's about who's the people around you who've got your back. And if that's 5 or 6 people, brilliant. But who's your core support network? And I always talk about I moved from the north of England to the south of England many years ago to live with my husband, and I lost my network. And for a while, I was a little bit unhappy, but I can make that network happen. So I had to join gyms and do classes, which I hate doing because I'd much rather run by myself and sweat by myself.
Sure,
But
absolutely, yes.
yeah, you know, I don't want to sweat with other people. Um, But making yourself do that stuff and visit the neighbours and go to events. You've got to do that tough stuff. So support network, coping skills. And what I mean by that is that's not about resilience, just getting up and getting up and getting up. It's about doing stuff, the physical resilience and the mental resilience. We need to exercise. If you don't like exercise, substitute it for movement. You know, it's about moving every day.
Mm,
It's about coping skills are about how you view the world, your values, your belief system, being able to separate the narrative from the emotion, having an understanding of your own motivation and what drives you. Also, supporting others is important. A
mm.
real important key indicator of happiness is helping others. And so there's certain things that we can do to build a structure around happiness and knowing that it's okay not to be happy and also challenge and developing yourself is a big part of it. So if we take those things and think about, well, what are the things that I need to do a bit more of in my life? And that will help me. And people often, when they're unhappy or sad or there's mental illness, they do less of that stuff. Now, it's
Mm.
not saying that we should always hide away or we should force ourselves to do stuff, but there's a very key difference between action orientated um, happiness. And what I mean by that is doing actions that support your happiness and not feeling great. So you can still feel a bit crappy. Do the stuff that will help you to feel better. And sometimes we have to separate the two.
No, absolutely. No, thank you for those 3 pillars right there. So recently, like 6 months ago, I actually did burn out. I told myself I'm okay. I don't need friends. I don't need a social network. I can lock myself in my room for 14 hours a day and work. Did not hit the gym, didn't read, meditate, etc. And I self-sabotaged the absolute hell out of my life, out of my business, etc. Broke up with my girlfriend, spent all of my, not all of my money, but spent an ungodly amount of money for absolutely zero reason. It was horrible. And now I'm actively building social networks. So I have a networking event coming up in like 2 or 3 weeks, which I'm really excited about. I'm the host, so that should be fun. In the gym constantly, and obviously support my staff, support my team, and support my loved ones as well. And it's so interesting because actually took a step back from the thing I so desperately wanted to do, which was work. I took a step back from that, focused on other pillars and areas of my life. And not only am I happier and more fulfilled, but I show up in my work and my podcast so much better, right? My staff notices it, my friends notice it, loved ones notice it, and it's just so interesting to me how those three basic things can really change someone's life entirely, right? A little bit of movement, make sure you love people, and make sure do your best to ensure other people love you. It's like these simple things, but they make all the world of a difference. Couple more questions for you. Do you have any case studies or specific client results of you working with an organization, installing the flip model, as you say, and achieving more happiness?
There's a couple of examples I can think of. So one's a school, which I'll talk about first. So the school particularly is in a difficult area in the UK. It's known for being a underperforming school. And the reason why I started working with that school is because we had a nice baseline and we could see if we could shift things. So we implemented Flip with the kids, and so they felt a bit more in control. But we also implemented the lessons around how you support yourself, how you support other people, your own support network, your coping skills. So those pillars that I was talking about. Now, what we wanted to do is boost the children's happiness and well-being, and the teachers as well. Happy teachers make happy kids. And so we had a baseline, and we certainly did that over a year. So it was over a year, and we had an external organization working with us on this. But what we didn't account for, which was really exciting, is the results went up. And for the first time in the history of the school, they achieved the national average in maths and English. And it's exactly what you've just said, Jordan. You get the baseline right. You get people believing in themselves, feeling happy, and then productivity, learning, whatever we want to call it, goes up. And so that's one example. The other example is a company over here called Allwyn, and they own the National Lottery over here. And it used to be another company. I think the Allwyn's in the States as well, because it's global. And the National Lottery used to be owned by a different company called Camelot. And so when Allwyn took over, because two cultures came together, there was a little bit of collide and a little bit of unsettled. And so we were brought in to support that change and to create people to align and move forward together. Their engagement scores, when you look, we had a baseline that we needed to improve. And so by looking at particularly how we build into their values, which they already had great values about supporting each other, innovation, being inclusive. But how do we build on that? How do we really embed great relationships in the organization, great conversations? How do we create a culture of trust and psychological safety? And again, we've seen their results, their engagement scores go up. And so each one of those you can see it's exactly what we've just said. You get the baseline stuff right. Everything else falls into place. And as much as AI is going to help us work a little bit better or faster, it's human beings. And we need social connection. We're emotive people. And so if someone feels crap, they're going to have a crap day at work. Doesn't matter what you try and do. Them right first. Turn on your people before you turn on your computers.
Interesting question I have for you as you were describing that. I know you don't like big words, but what happens psychologically or mentally when we are happier, we're having fun, and we're learning simultaneously? Why are we able to retain more information when we're in a cheerful mood opposed to, I have my lo-fi beats on in my background and I'm locked in and I'm focused. Like, why can we retain more when we're happy? Is out of curiosity.
Call it sticky learning.
Thank you.
Look, stress isn't a bad word at all. And we need a little bit of stress. When we're stressed, more adrenaline is produced in the brain. And that gives us what I call the kick up the bum hormone. The night before you had an exam in school, someone like me and you, and there's no way I revised for weeks on end. The night before, I was sitting there till 5 o'clock in the morning, cramming it in my brain. Stress was high. And so noradrenaline makes us get stuff done. But too much of it shuts down our thinking. And it's like a gear stick, if you like. I like to think of it as a gear stick, and we're in control of that gear stick. Now, when we enjoy something or when we help ourselves to move that gear stick up, we produce dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, and that's produced through laughter, through connections, through me enjoying somebody's company, through learning something new and feeling a bit stretched, that focus. And we need dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins to make learning stick in the brain. It's like the glue that goes, okay, let's stick that new learning, that new neuro connection together. The neuroadrenaline motivates the brain to grow a little bit and do something, but the dose, what I call a dose of laughter or a dose of happiness, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, that sticks it together. And we remember through positive emotional response better. Now, you might remember through fear and negative emotional response. That's absolutely true. But generally, you need that thing there to remind you not to do it, or that negative emotion, and the brain's more likely to shut down and not think clearly through that. So positive emotional response makes us remember stuff way times better.
Thank you so much for those insights. I was dying to know. Okay, so Stephanie, it was a pleasure having you on the show. If someone wanted to explore your work further, what's the first step?
Go to laughology.co.uk and you can have a look at what we do there. There's lots of videos on the site that are free. We've also got a webinar on culture on the 27th of February. So it's a free webinar. Anyone can book on. I think it might be nearly sold out, but also they can buy the book, Laughology, Improve Your Life Through the Science of Laughter.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, thank you again for hopping on the show. I had a great time. I definitely got some laughs in. And audience, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much.